Thank you and good health to you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak on this bill. And can I first of all say to Melissa Lee that it's wise not to make assumptions on how the political parties on this side of the House is going to vote before we even have the chance to contribute. This bill was introduced to the House in the previous term, and therefore New Zealand First did not have the opportunity to contribute to its first reading debate. If we did, there would have been some improvement to the bill in order to address a few loopholes it currently has. So while the national government continues to perform like pessimists who see difficulty in every opportunity, the New Zealand First is more optimist in seeing opportunity in every difficulty. The current bill aligns itself with modern norms and values which capture the actuality that pensioners are confronted with when applying for two separate but similar applications for living alone payments. The bill recognises that the stakeholders concerned deserved one simple application, which is indicative of ensuring that pensioners have easier access to what they are entitled to. The current bill now has some teeth behind its lip service, and I want to acknowledge the minority view report by the Labour Party that raises some very valid points. The main benefit of the bill is that it simplifies accessibility to and increases the utilisation of entitlements through the New Zealand Superannuation and Retirement Income Act and the War Pensions Act for the sole purpose of making one application. The interrelatedness of the two bills recognises the cross-cut of eligibility in order to receive a supplementary benefit for individuals who live alone. It also recognises the need for greater emphasis on simplifying social assistance procedures for entitlements so that pensioners may go about their daily lives without fussing over making another separate application. Well, why did it take the national government over 4 years to do something right? Perhaps national governments were too busy cutting funding to the 24/7 victims helpline. Or perhaps the national government took too long to realise that they just can't justify punishing these respected citizens who have sweat, blood and tears for us to be where we are now. After all, these are the same citizens who have suffered under the gruesome labour force of the past, made sacrifices for our generation and yet have not yet asked for more than a helping hand. The proposed changes in this bill are in tune with what pensioners need and indicates a shift away from bureaucratic red tape which New Zealand First firmly supports. It is not every day that we agree with the national government or see eye to eye, but New Zealand First recognises the importance for this government's duty to properly determine the genuine needs of those who are deserving of welfare, especially when it comes to superannuitants and veterans. Emphasis should also focus on a sustainable increase regarding the payment rate to make a more effective and positive impact on the lives of many pensioners. Concerns over its capacity to benefit different living arrangements and its traditional cloudy perception of dependent children have been remedied, and we are very pleased about that. Living alone is now defined as a person who occupies a principal place of residence of a specified kind and does not share that residence with anyone aged 18 and over. We acknowledge exceptions are applicable to pensioners who live with a dependent child or person who is not financially independent and is attending an educational institution. However, we are mindful that the bill still has conflicting consequences for the dependent child upon assessment for student allowance, which ought to be addressed further. The definition of a dependent child reflects its modern interpretation and understanding through the Social Security Act and also place of residence by incorporating boarding houses as a form of residence through the Residential Tenancies Act. The main concern is over its potential overlap with the other entitlements that dependent students may be confronted with due to his or her living arrangement, which should be considerably important also. Similarly, there needs to be greater clarity and informative measures that allow pensioners to gain greater and, well, shall we say, greater understanding about their rights and entitlements. This responsibility should be placed on the staff who process these applications so that there is transparency and communication regarding the well-being of pensioners. Making this a priority will foster more effectiveness and promote better respectability shown to pensioners. New Zealand is becoming increasingly more diverse with different and often conflicting hegemonic ideals that directly affect pensioners. This should not be viewed in a negative way. Instead, this should encourage greater emphasis on providing possible alternatives to meet the pace of changing society. With this bill, I suppose you could say it is a step in the right direction, because we believe in supporting good legislation and opposing bad legislation. This might not be an excellent legislation, but it provides a slightly better opportunity for our citizens. The positive aspect of the proposed changes afford pensioners that same definitive classifications of a dependent child as working age beneficiaries. The bill also accepts that there is no unitary residence and avoids using a one-size-fits-all definition regarding pensioners' place of residence. This bill can also potentially become futile if it is not dealt with in an appropriate fashion. Egalitarian values need to be open to different circumstances, and policies should also reflect and respond to these differences with urgency and respect. Although we are cautious about the potential cracks and shortfalls, New Zealand First supports the bill. We support it because it contributes towards securing the needs of retired New Zealanders regarding easier accessibility. It also minimises rules and provisions around defining a dependent child and place of residence. If my interpretation is the same as the Minister and her national government, the proposed changes allow the superannuitants and veteran pensioners receive the living alone allowance. This is beneficial because it excludes the restriction and insensitive nature of the 28-day rules that govern the entitlement when a person experiences the grieving process of losing a loved one. All New Zealanders should be afforded the same degree of respect and dignity, which are principles that underpin our egalitarian values. Equality measures and sustainable schemes should be open to how we live our daily lives and not be misinformed by how we ought to live our lives. This requires tuning in on how New Zealanders go about their lives and is a symbolic of better governance practices. The intended outcomes on print should have a positive impact on the lives of pensioners in reality. In the next 30 years, 26% of the population will be over 65 years old, from 550,000 to well over 1 million New Zealanders receiving a form of retirement income. The challenge now is to maintain immediate certainty whilst planning for long-term security with additional measures in place. I say to the National Government, don't be afraid to take one large step with this bill, because you can't cross into the chasm in two small leaps. The enhancement in this bill reiterates the importance of minimising bureaucracy and maximising the full enjoyment of entitlements. Pensioners are afforded less time worrying about living alone payment and more time spent and enjoying their retirement. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand First supports this bill in its second reading with a view of some minor amendments in order to address some of the loopholes. And allow me to wish all the residents of Manukau East, including every member in this House, and of course all the Super Gold card holder, a very Merry Christmas and a safe and pleasant New Year. Thank you.
Jackie Dean.
Mr. Speaker,